Have you ever wanted to pick the brains of a published author? Well, starting with episode 80 of Horrible Writing, you're going to get to do that. We're going to talk about publishing, process, and programs. Episode 80, Horrible Writing. That will never work. You can't publish that. Seriously? Don't. Oh my God, that's another thing to do. That's bad. You probably should find other hobbies. You ever learn how to stop? Be happy. Well, you don't bother me. I've seen better. Do you really want to do? And give it up. Welcome to Horrible Writing, the rawest, most candid, in-your-face writing show on the interwebs because none of us have time to suck. Let's do this. Hey everybody, Paul Sading, your host for Horrible Writing. I hope this finds you well and incredibly creative, and I want to thank a number of you for joining us over there on the Horrible Writing Writer Support Group on Facebook. We've seen an inordinate amount of requests coming in to join the group, so it's really cool to see us growing. That group is incredibly supportive. It is aimed at developing, encouraging, and supporting. So it's not going to be one thing for everybody. There is no such thing. It's going to be a lot of things for a lot of people. Part of my mission is empowerment through candor, but for everyone to lift each other, all of us. As we learn, we teach each other. I think that's a beautiful thing, and I think it's a thing that's missing. Usually when you see that in groups, it's all about people asking questions out of selfish motivations and then hoping somebody will answer them. And we're not really about that. We're really about each other. So if you want to be part of a healthy community, if you want to be part of the future episodes of Pick Paul's Brain like this one, and if you want your stories ever featured on the Stories We Tell podcast, which launches in April, then you need to come over and join us in the Horrible Writing Writer Support Group on Facebook. Dawn is part of that group, and she approached me a few weeks ago about doing this thing where it's a reverse interview. She proposed this while she did not know at that time that I was going to pull back on interviews to try to recapture some of my writing time. I really, really have to focus on that. And it was perfect timing for her, this idea, because what's going to happen in these episodes is you, the Horrible Writing community, are going to send me your audio questions, not questions about audio, but questions about writing via audio, and I'm going to be able to answer them while also giving you a little bit of time to kind of tell the world about yourself. Dawn's idea, I can't thank her enough. I think it's ingenious, and I'm not saying I'm the be-all, end-all to this, but I think this is a neat way for you specifically to get things you want out of this show, when you want them, how you want them, from somebody I hope you trust. Now, with this episode, it's the first one. I'm going to try to do Dawn's questions justice. I've put a lot of thought into them since she sent them, and I have my opinions, and I want to frame this episode as that, hey, this is Paul's opinions. So I will, and have for Dawn, but I will go and research things that to try to give you a better, more well-rounded response to some of these things as necessary. Fortunately, Dawn gave me questions that I can answer comfortably myself with a little bit of opinion that I got from doing some research for her. So with no further ado, let's go introduce Dawn and hear what her first question is.
Hi, Paul. This is Dawn Pizzo, and other than in high school and college, I am new to writing. I have been entertaining an idea for a novel since 2013. I have been researching the process on how to write a novel. I have subscribed to several writing podcasts, and I have joined several writing communities on social media. I have multiple notebooks with endless notes, a cast of characters' names, a handful of scenes, and I have written my first paragraph. I think for the time being I would like to write as a hobby with the dream of possibly publishing a trilogy. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to pick your brain, and I appreciate all that you do. Here are my questions to you. As a novice to the world of writing, can you give me a brief overview of the process from your initial idea for a novel to publishing?
Now, this question is very interesting, framed interestingly by Dawn, because she's asking me to briefly describe this process. And Dawn has listened long enough to know that that's a challenge in and of itself for me. But idea generation to published book. Very nuanced for me because I also adapt the audio dramas. But I will put those to the side for this question and talk instead about the novels or the non-adapted works. So something like 12 Deaths of Christmas. Something like Novel Idea to Podcast, though it's a nonfiction. And The Scales, my upcoming book, the first book I'll publish in 2019. So, idea generation to published work. To cover big picture, macro perspective type stuff. So there is the spark, right? The creative spark that gets you excited to do something. One of the best pieces of advice I'd ever heard for a novel was from fantasy author Brandon Sanderson, who said, you could have the greatest, and I'm not recalling this verbatim, so I want to do him justice for that, but you can have a great idea, a very exciting idea, a novel idea for a novel, but to sustain that story over the course of a novel is unrealistic, and it'll fall flat, and the novel will not have the body that it needs to engage readers. So what he strives for is, 2 to 3 stellar ideas. So think about those story ideas that you have when you have that neat idea for a novel, for a book. What Brandon's telling you is, hey, don't stop there. You need to develop 2 to 3 of those ideas on that level in order to get a book. And what he does is he will look at those 3, 4 big brain ideas and amalgamate them into a grander idea, if you will. So idea generation aside, making sure that you've got something with meat in it is fine. Now, for me, for The Scales, since that's the new upcoming book, that I was outlining while I was working on other things. And I think everybody's brain works a little different. You have to be able to focus on things. Now, when I was doing The Scales, when I was outlining The Scales, I don't do huge outlines. I'm a hybrid. I'm not a pantser by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not a heavy plotter. For The Scales, for example, I knew the beginning, and I thought I knew the end, and I had some major beats along the way, and then I started outlining it. I keep a whiteboard in the office behind me, and I throw sticky notes up on it anytime an idea comes to me. But I do the hour clock idea. You start, at hour 12, you start your book. At hour 6 is, the 6 o'clock hand, the hands on the 6 o'clock, you're 50% done, and you break it down into quarters like that. So the 3 and the 9, and then obviously the midnight when you come back around to 12 again, being the culmination of the book. And I use that circular diagram with little like spider arms to lay out my beats. When I think I have enough beats, I lay them out on that. So I write the beats out first, then I draw like a little clock on a big piece of paper, and I start going around the clock. Well, I start at the top with the opening, and then I start back at midnight with the ending. And then I look at that, and I look at all of those beat ideas I have, and I start laying them out on that clock. I do this in pencil because things change. And this takes a lot of revision time. So again, not huge, 30-page outliner, but I do put a lot of thought into what happens and where it happens. Then when I have that laid out, I go and I chronologically set up, write out an outline. So it's that process of actually writing this out. I do it by hand and then transpose it into my writing program, which I'll talk about later. But at least that process helps me think through these things. And thinking through these things before you commit to them is the big thing. I'm not going to tell you how the Scales ends. I hope that when it comes out this summer, that you'll go pick it up and support me, and then you can find out for yourself how it ends. But the ending, which my beta readers gave me nothing but serious kudos on, so I was really pleased because I was so worried that was the right way to go. That didn't happen originally. There was another ending, and during my outlining, which is why I'm spending so much time answering your question this way, is because I worry. Now, of course, this is genre specific. Some genres are very formulaic and you have to stay in that box. Horror thrillers aren't. They've got their tropes and their their beats and their formulas, but beyond that, it's scaled down much more so than something like romance would be, right? So consider your genre while you're doing this. But while I was writing out the outline, it was the physical act of writing it out where I realized that the ending wasn't strong enough. It wasn't surprising enough. It was kind of, you could see it coming. So taking that step back, developing 3 different endings. I developed 3 different endings. And in doing that is when I realized what the ending needed to be. So that made me go back and obviously change some of the beats to set that up. So that's where it goes. So idea generation to really laying this out in whatever form or fashion works for you. But even pantsers, you got to put something somewhere. Or you're going to be doing a lot of revision, or you're going to be telling a very tame story that we see coming a mile down the road. By outlining it, even in bullet point formats per beat, it's going to help you see that. It's going to help you see your tempo and your pacing. It's going to help you see your POV shifts, all of those things. Then what I do, since Dawn did ask about process, is I start obviously writing that. I write it. I put it to the side when it's done for 2 months and go work on something else, because by now I'm tired of that story and the new thing is going to be exciting. I go finish that new thing or go back to the Scales after the 2-month period, which I didn't have to do. And then I start editing and I do a big picture, making sure pacing and flow is good. And then I get into the deep, finer details. When those finer details are done, to about the 80% point, I send it out to beta readers and say, hey, don't worry about some of the grammar you're going to find. Yes, there's probably some naming inconsistencies. Tell me about the story. What do you think the story is all about? And while they're answering that, I go make sure that that manuscript is airtight, ready to go to editor the minute the beta readers are done. The beta reader feedback comes back. While that, while the beta readers have it, I do that airtight editing, and then I go work on another project till I have the deadline met for all beta readers. I get their feedback back, see what needs to happen, and adjust as necessary, and off to the editor it goes, which the Scales did last week. So the middle of March 2019. I know I have 6 weeks of that book sitting with my editor. So what I'm doing is I'm already about 35% of the way done with a major edit for the book that's going to follow that, called RIP, RIP. So by the time the scales comes back from the editor, I should be, in theory, I should be done with RIP editing. And that means that I'll be done with RIP editing. I'll have the scales back from my editor. I will go look at my editor's edits, adjust as necessary, and then go to publish while she's got RIP. And the cycle continues. I should always have something in motion, but that's my goal, folks. My goal is to make a living from my writing. Therefore, I have to treat it like a business. And I don't know a business that doesn't have a product in production mode, in making sure that you have inventory, right? Well, that's what we do as authors. We make sure we have inventory. So that's my process from idea to publication.
Is there a POV that is recommended for beginners?
So this second question is an interesting question. Point of view for beginners. Let me kill the easy one right away. Well, there's two of them I would kill right away. Second person, that's hard as hell to write. I don't know how people do it. Kudos to you who can. And then this one might be more controversial for a number of you. Omniscient third person. The reason I say that for beginners is unless you've done a ton of writing and throwing stuff away, ton of writing, throwing stuff away for, and I mean years, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Without serious review, the problem with omniscient third person point of view is head jumping. A lot of POV problems in those types of manuscripts. And even to the point where it can be very subtle and fine and just cause a lot of problems. Especially for those of you who cannot get to writers groups or choose not to get to writers groups where you're going to, and I mean a good writers group being a group of mature writers who shelve their personal feelings and don't worry about getting their feelings hurt. They actually will give you candid, constructive feedback, but candidly to make your thing better. I'm fortunate. I have one of those. Not everybody does. And not everybody's willing to. Some people will do it online. This is a gut check that you individually have to do. One, you have to look in the mirror and you honestly have to gauge how ready you are for this type of feedback. You have to. And then if you're not there, you got to get there. And if you want to do this, you got to get to the point where people can give you constructive feedback. And that's one of the things I see in writing in general, especially from beginning writers, is the point of view problem when you go omniscient third. So where you're able to hear everybody's head and kind of lends itself to head jumping. Back in the day, you could get away with that. Now it's not fashionable, and I'm glad. I'm not a big fan of you got to have real tight skills to pull off multiple POVs in a chapter, in a scene, and do so in a way that your readers aren't confused. And I just said you've got to have real tight skills to do that. Beginners don't have tight skills. We have to develop those. And I include myself in that. Until I had the sales to prove otherwise, I probably will always say that. So I would stay away from second and omniscient third. Do first person. I could see that one working. And I would say even close third. Now you can do that with a solitary point of view, which is tough to do over the course of a novel. Trust me, I've just done it, and I swore to my wife I will never do it again. Or multiple point of views over the course of a novel, but close POV. I feel that helps you tell your story, get some content out in the world so you can start getting your corner carved out before it becomes so crowded you never get a chance to get any ripple, any movement on anything. but it also allows you to practice your skill. We're always improving. If you hold that book until you have nailed down the perfect point of view for your voice, you're going to get that one book out in 15 years, 10 years, whatever. And in a marketplace like it is now, driven by the internet, good luck to you. I mean that genuinely, but good luck to you, because you better write the next great novel. For those of you who are looking to do more, something along the lines of what I'm doing, you can still put great content out there. And you got to work hard. You got to sweat, and you got to put hundreds and thousands of hours into it, but you can get it out there and still work your way through point of view. Of course, as you develop, try other things. Join the Horrible Writing Writer Support Group if you're not there, and partake in our monthly challenge like one of our past months, where our ringleader for our monthly challenges, Natalie, made us write in a different point of view than we typically do. That's not easy. So join us there. But in a serious note, if you don't join us, come over and join us or work on it on your own. Great question. This episode of Horrible Writing was brought to you by my book, Novel Idea to Podcast, How to Sell More Books Through Podcasting. If you are a published author and you haven't thought about audio as a vehicle to sell more books, you're missing out on a huge market. Pick up Novel Idea to Podcast, How to Sell More Books Through Podcasting, anywhere that you get your digital books. Head over to paulsading.com, click on the Books Nonfiction tab for more information.
Writer's block. I refer to it as brain freeze. Tell me, how do you thaw it out?
I had to do research for this third question, and I'm just going to shoot straight because you are my tribe. The Horrible Writing family are my people. And I've always said from episode 1, empowerment through candor. I got to be real with you. We have to have real conversations, or we don't improve. We don't grow together. So here's the thing. I don't believe in writer's block. I don't. So, in order to answer this, how do you thaw out that frozen brain? I think there's tactical things that you can do to avoid having writer's block. And fortunately, during my research to answer this, to see what other authors would say, I found a lot of similar answers and a lot of established people who don't believe in writer's block either. Now, some of you are adamant that you have it, and it's not cool that I would say that. And to you, I would ask this. Challenge your thinking. Challenge your biases. I have them. You have them. We all have them. So if you hear me say there's no such thing as it, don't try to sit there and play mental tug of war with me to prove me wrong. Entertain me. That's all I'm asking. Open the aperture to see if you're missing blind spots. You know, those dark little corners in the room. And in that corner, you may have left the thing you've needed to unlock the key, unlock this lock all along. So, ritual. Write every single damn day. Write something. I mean this. Get your writing space. Get a couple of writing spaces, safe places where everybody in your family, in your house knows, even your roommates, they know that when you're in that corner of the room, don't talk to them. They're writing. That's their writing space. But you got to get into that mindset. When I sit in this particular place, I am here to work. I am here to write. I'm not here to surf the internet. I'm not here to get distracted by social media or thoughts of world conquest. I'm here to write. And if you have a couple places, that's fine. I happen to have one in the house And then I have one out of my home when I need that systems refresh. So I think that mindset, I have to write every day. And you all know, as my audience, 0 word count days. My goal is to never have a 0 word count day. I will always write something. I did an episode where 100 word count day was fine. And I explained about balance between life and happiness and contentment and this drive to be published. There has to be a balance there. So even if it's a 50-word day because I just had to get up for 10 minutes before the family had to run out for an all-day excursion, I still did it. Or I wrote on my phone while the spouse was driving or whatever. There's always a way you can write every single day. So to help you get stronger, you do it. You write every single day to avoid writer's block. And here's another extension of that I want you to consider if you still aren't bought in. When you write every single day, you're flexing that brain, you're strengthening that habit, but also the expectation management, and also cognitively, you're entering that creative space in your brain, and it gets stronger. Secondly, it keeps the story immediate. It keeps you in that sense of creativity, the immediacy of it, the intimacy of it every single day. It starts to become a habit. That doesn't mean you have to work on the same story every day, though I would recommend that. Stop chasing those highs, like I told you in a previous episode. Finish the damn story you're working on, then go get that new sexy idea, but not until. But doing it every day keeps you intimately present in that moment. Stopping, Hemingway's tip of stopping at the exciting part of your writing day. That's tough. It really is. But you'll find if you do this, do it for 30 days straight so that it's becomes a habit-forming behavior. But stopping your writing for the day at a point that's exciting, that's stimulating, that's sexy, that's action-packed, whatever it may be. Your heroine tells your antagonist, kiss my ass because, and you literally stop that sentence right after because. And all day long, you're thinking about why the antagonist can kiss her ass. You're not going to be able to wait to get back to that keyboard. You're going to be running over small children to be able to write again. Doing things like that. Outlining, carrying a notebook around with you and capturing ideas while they happen. A lot of us are busy. We're on the move. We're on the go. We're chained to those damn small rectangles of plastic and computer chips and all those fancy things I don't understand. And yet they can be note-taking devices, literally in a note program or recording in our own voice, right? You get those ideas, jot them down. Help put those distractions in a file somewhere where they need to be for the future. Capture the great beat that you just came up with because something inspired you in your world, or you finally figured out how to pull off that plot twist. It keeps you immediate. The story remains immediate, intimate. When I say immediate, I mean you never leave it. There's always a part of you that feels like you're in that world. And you all have ideas. The challenge is behaviorally, how do we capture those ideas? You capture those ideas by arming yourself with tools. Notebooks in the car, notebooks by your bed, your phone, obviously. Always have something with you so you can jot things down. You're not going to remember it later. When you have that idea at night and you're like, I don't want to get up and get the notebook, blah, 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 I'm tired. And guess what? You're going to forget it by the morning. So you have to it's pragmatic. I realize that. And it's not sexy. But writing every day, arming yourself with those tools, stopping your writing session, in a sexy, action-packed, tense, dramatic moment, whatever it is, and coming back to it the next day, Doing these little things are what is going to get you in the habit forming phase. And that's the key to thawing out writer's block. Habit forming behaviors. You have responsibilities. We all do. Stop giving yourself that excuse. And I'm not talking to Dawn. I'm talking to the world. Give yourself the tools to stay true to that behavior change, stay on course, and being that armed writer so that you can stay immediate in your story. I want to thank Dawn for her idea. I hope that this is exciting for all of you. Even if it's not your questions I'm answering, I still hope you get something out of it. So I'm going to ask all of you as the Horrible Writing family, what are some of those questions that you would love answered? 3 to 5 questions. Send them, record it on your phone. I will give you the specific directions if you're interested in doing it. Record it in the quietest place in your house. Bring your bedroom comforter along with you. Put it over top of you and your phone to cut out all kinds of noise. Go sit in a closet. Give me 15 seconds of silence at the beginning and then start talking. And I can clean it up enough to use it. And I will answer your questions and help you along the way because we all rise together. So, Dawn, thank you for leaving your legacy on Horrible Writing with this suggestion and this request. I think it's an absolutely beautiful thing. When Dawn, because she will, when Dawn publishes, she's going to come back on the show. We're going to talk about her book. I'm going to interview her and pick her brain, and you'll all get to meet her and support her when she goes published. Dawn, thank you so much for this. For everybody else, start thinking about what questions you would ask and send them in. Depending on the response, will depend on how often I do this. I think this is enjoyable. I may not do 5 questions in the future because I realized how long this episode was. But we'll learn as we grow together, right? That's what it's all about. In the meantime, while you're thinking of your questions, please take a couple seconds to go rate and review the show on your podcatcher. iTunes, Apple Podcasts is a great one to do. It helps other people find the show. If you want exclusives each month with Horrible Writing, You, which is a choose your own adventure audio drama, short fiction, flash fiction, short stories that I do. And obviously, each episode of this show has patron exclusives. And starting late spring, early summer, medieval, high fantasy, Crown of Thieves are all exclusives that my patrons get. There are different levels, so make sure you check it out on Patreon. But a lot of this access comes at the $1 to $3 range per month, not per episode. Help me keep this show and all of those creations going so that we can enrich the world with art together. Join us on Horrible Writing Writer Support Group on Facebook. And until then, until episode 81, keep being epic. This has been Horrible Writing, and hopefully after this episode, you suck less than you did at the beginning. I am Paul Sading, your host extraordinaire. You can find me over on the Twitterverse @WritingHorrible and over at paulsading.com/horrible-writing. Until next time, suck less.